Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to the English Right Now podcast. Today, we're talking about one of arguably the most important parts of British culture, in my opinion. It is a cup of tea. And joining me to give his opinion on how to make the perfect cup of tea is my dear friend Rob. Hello, Rob. You couldn't even wait to drink a cup of tea. Welcome.
Well, like all British people, I love my tea, so I had to have a quick cuppa there before we started. But hello, Roy. Yes, hello, everybody. I love tea.
You used a wonderful word right there, cuppa, which is a slang way of saying a cup of tea because it sounds like a cup of tea, and we sometimes just refer to it as a cuppa. But we only use that really to talk about tea. We wouldn't say, "Oh, I want a cuppa," and mean a coffee.
Agreed. And we can have tea in all different sort of forms and different tastes. I mean, I like builder's tea, which is a really strong cup of tea where the tea has really brewed and a little bit of milk, but it's quite dark and quite a strong cup of tea. How about you, Roy? How do you like your tea?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I don't put sugar in it. I like it quite strong, with a splash of milk. Not too much milk. We'll talk about something my wife did at some point. My wife is Brazilian, and she tried to make a cup of tea for a friend. We're going to talk about it because it went horribly wrong. But I like quite a strong tea, but I don't like sugar. Some people like putting sugar into their tea, a spoonful of sugar, or even a sugar cube.
Like you, I don't like sugar in my tea anymore. I used to like it sweet, but now I'm sweet enough. I don't need extra sugar.
So we're going to talk about whether you're a Miffy or a Tiffy a little bit later on. But first of all, we're going to talk about how to make a perfect mug of tea, a perfect mug of tea.
You mean we've heard of cup and saucer, where you have a smaller, more dainty little cup on a saucer where you can put your spoon and it catches any drops as well of tea. So, in quite a well-to-do, maybe quite a posh household, and in olden times, they had a nice cup and saucer, but there wasn't much tea in a cup, whereas a mug is bigger, more sturdy, and you get more tea in it, don't you?
Less likely to break, I would say, which is probably why builders would drink their tea out of a mug. So, how do we make that perfect mug of tea?
Well, the first thing, of course, is to boil the water. The water has to be boiling hot, not lukewarm, which kind of means medium hot, or tepid, which also means sort of just on the cooler side of hot. This has to be boiling hot water because I believe, and I've been told, that it's the boiling water that really makes the flavor of the tea leaves come out, into the water. So it's got to be hot boiling water. That's the first thing. Then there's two ways of doing this. Now, these days when we're so busy, the quickest way is to use a tea bag. In the cup, put the water in it and leave it for a few minutes. But of course, the correct way to make tea is with tea leaves, loose leaf tea, bits of tea, which go in a pot, and you fill the pot up. So a teapot is a traditional way to make tea, and then you give it a few minutes to brew, and let the water infuse with the tea leaves, and you get a nice pot of tea.
Yeah, absolutely right. That infuse, that word is where the basically the tea sort of comes into the water and makes it taste of the actual leaves themselves, the infuse. But let's go back first of all. So that first thing that we do, we put the water in a kettle. So the kettle is a device that we have. We usually plug it in the wall, and then it will boil the water. And that water needs to be as close as you possibly can to 100 degrees when you put it into the mug. Now, a lot of people talk about milk in first, tea in first, but when it comes to a bag, a tea bag in a mug, milk in first or the tea bag first?
Tea bag in the water, no milk at this stage, because I believe, again, that the milk will reduce the temperature of the water and therefore it won't brew properly. So I'd leave the tea bag in the boiling water. Milk comes later.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the tea in first, milk in first, that's not even part of this debate. So when you are making a mug of tea in the container itself, in the mug itself, tea bag in first, put the water in the boiling water as near to boiling as you possibly can, and then leave it. I usually leave it for around 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah, well, I say the longer you leave it, the stronger it is. And because I like strong tea, like you, 3 or 4 minutes in the cup. Yeah. But some people just like to just dip the tea bag in, take it out. And so it's more or less just hot water with a slight hint of tea. But that seems a waste to me. And the other expression that we often use here is, I'll put the kettle on. You might be, you go out for a walk, you come home, rather than say, I'm going to make a cup of tea, you go, I'll put the kettle on, which is kind of code for meaning I'll make a cup of tea.
When I lived in Brazil and I came back to the UK for the first time, because obviously tea drinking is a very British thing. That people drink tea all over the world, but the way we make it with the bag and the cup, it's a very British cultural thing, and it's not as common in Brazil. It's more of a coffee drinking culture, I would say. And I remember coming home for the first time, and my dad said, "Fancy a cuppa?" Right, and I was like, "Oh, I'm home." And it just kind of made me really kind of emotional. And then he said, "I'll stick the kettle on." Oh, I mean, it's like a film moment for me. It was so magical that my dad making me a cup of tea for the first time in it, like months, if not a year. It was lovely. But yeah, it's a very
it's music. We could say music to your ears. The thing you really like to hear. Somebody saying, "I'll put the kettle on." And I know tea making. I mean, particularly in the UK, is a whole historical thing, isn't it? It's to do with our history that we like tea. We can talk about that another time. But that's why we've become a nation of tea drinkers, as they say.
Indeed, we have. And another thing, so we're talking about, so we've let the water, we've left the bag in the water for 4 minutes. We pull the bag out sometimes. Some people leave the bag in, and then we add a splash of milk to taste. So if you want it stronger, you put a small amount of milk. You want it sort of weaker, you maybe put more milk in there. And this brings me on to my story with my wife. So a friend of mine, a dear friend who I just saw, she popped over to our house, and my wife said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" I said, "Oh, yes, please." Then my wife went to make a cup of tea. And what my wife brought out looked like milk. Hot milk. So what she'd done was she'd boiled the water, put the bag in the water, like whoosh, whoosh, like a very quick action, maybe left it in for 20 seconds or 10 seconds, just let the tea sniff the milk. No, sniff the bag, and then threw the bag away, and then splash milk in there, and it honestly looked like warm milk. And she'd used way too much milk. And my friend was very polite, and she went, "Thank you." Took a sip, and immediately after, I said, "Do you want me to make you another one?" And she said, "Yes, please." And I said to my wife, I said, "Don't worry, I'm going to teach you how to make the perfect cup of tea," which is what we're doing today. Bag in, boiling hot water, 4 minutes, splash of milk, maybe even let the person choose how much milk they want.
You could offer a milk jug, which has a little jug with some milk in for pouring in. They can choose whether they want a splash of milk. Some people do like tea milky, so they could put more milk in if they want to. Yeah. But of course, the other option, the right way for some people, is to have a slice of lemon and no milk. Imagine
I've
that.
Heard that. No, thank you. I prefer milk. I prefer milk in my tea. I know probably a lot of people find it really weird that we put milk in our tea, but that's a very British cultural thing, I think, that we use milk in tea. Yeah, some people do use lemon, but for me, no, thank you. I heard even an American saying tea is best served with salt.
No.
If it's not in the microwave, it's in salt. There you go. So we've talked about like that. And I've one thing I've heard, and I don't know if you've tried it, but apparently tea tastes best in a red mug. That's your homework.
Okay, I'll go and try find a red mug.
But yeah, so that is how to make a perfect cup of tea from home. But what we're talking about as well, when we're talking about milk in first or tea in first, it's actually in reference to teapots. So traditionally, we would have a thing called a teapot, and then put the water in there, and then it would sort of infuse or brew in the pot itself, and then you would pour the tea from the pot into a cup or a mug. And there comes the debate. Now, it wasn't always tea bags. Like you said, we could use loose leaf or like sort of bits of like little tea that was not in a bag. Bag is far easier, in my opinion. It's much more convenient, easier to use. But
tea leaves have more flavor, I believe. Tea leaves haven't been sort of manufactured so much and put into the bag. But anyway, that's one thing. Yeah, tea leaves. Yeah.
Oh, and of course, what we need to say, we are talking about black tea, aren't we?
Yes, that's right. Because that's a good point. Yeah, black tea, what we tend to call English breakfast tea, is the sort of the most regular black, dark color tea. There's lots of others, aren't there, like Earl Grey and orange pekoe and things like that. But there is also green tea and jasmine tea and those other kind of teas, which are not quite the same, are they?
No, the fruit teas, the kind of flavored teas, we don't tend to add milk. This is we're talking about a bog standard means typical, totally normal cup of tea. with black tea in a tea bag. If you're drinking fruit teas, lemon tea, herbal teas, we don't tend to add milk to those. Some teas we do, like Earl Grey, but this is a specific type of tea as well. So don't come over to England and say, I'd like a cup of lemon and jasmine tea with some milk. It would be weird.
No, they're more specialist teas, but yeah, as you say, Roy, we're talking about the bog standard, the regular British tea here that we drink every day. Yeah.
And those loose leaf teas are more common in a tea house. If you go to a tea house, you maybe have afternoon tea. That's something we can talk about another day. You maybe get your pot of tea with the leaves in top, and then you pour the water over, and then it's more of an experience with the leaves. I find. I think most people tend to have bags at home. But going back, there is this whole debate about milk in first or tea in first when it comes out of a teapot. When it's in a mug, it's always tea in first and milk afterwards. But some people debate milk in first or tea in first. And people that like milk in first from a teapot are sometimes referred to as Miffys, milk in first, Miffy. And if you like your tea in first and the milk afterwards, they are often referred to as a Tiffy, tea in first. Are you, sir, a Miffy or a Tiffy?
I like to put my milk in later because, again, you pour the tea out from the pot, have the right quantity, and then I can choose how much milk to put in to get that right color. Whereas if you put the milk in first, you're not quite sure how the tea is going to be and therefore what color it's going to be and therefore what taste. So milk in later. So what am I? A Tiffy?
You're a Tiffy. Tiffy, tea in first. I am too. I think traditionally, quite a few years ago, milk in first was seen as the more common way to do it. And it was because the china, the porcelain in the cup was so fragile that if you didn't put your milk in first, it would crack. The sudden change of temperature would crack the porcelain. So that was the whole thing there. So that was the whole idea. They would put milk in first to protect the cup. Of course, it does lower the temperature, which is why a lot of people don't. But as time has moved on, porcelain has moved on, mugs have become more and more of a thing. That is no longer an issue that the porcelain or cup is going to crack. So a lot of people now tend to put their tea in first. Most sites I've gone to say it doesn't really make a difference in terms of taste. However, most of them say tea in first, milk afterwards. Most British people I know would never, even with a teapot, while there is no significant difference, they would never put the milk in first. And one really interesting thing about that Miffy Tiffy debate of years gone past is also that it's hard to prove, it's hard to know if it was true, but some people, the sort of richer, upper class people who had better porcelain, they had better cups, would always put their tea in first to show that they had better cups than the people who had to put the milk in first. So if you put the milk in first, it was somewhat seen as a kind of lower class activity. It's hard to know if that's actually true, but I think it's a beautiful story if so.
Well, that's why I make my tea first and put the milk in later, obviously. I have better quality mugs now here in the house.
And one thing I do need to ask you, biscuits. Do you like biscuits with a cup of tea?
Oh, that is a real treat to have a biscuit, especially because you can dunk the biscuit into the tea and make it softer. Oh, that's a real treat.
What a word. Dunk it in. Submerge that biscuit. Make it softer. Not too many times. If you dunk it too many times, the biscuit falls apart and you have half a biscuit and then a biscuit-flavored tea. But what would you say is a good biscuit for a cup of tea?
There's some very boring biscuits like rich tea biscuits, which on their own are very boring. But when they're soaked in tea, it's quite nice. They get a nice texture. But of course, a chocolate biscuit is the best because putting it in the hot tea slightly melts the chocolate on the biscuit. And it's lovely. I want to go and get some very quickly.
I think we should go and make a cup of tea in a moment. But one thing I'll say is if you do want to learn some idioms related to tea, check out this lesson here. It's all about the different idioms related to tea. Enjoy that one.